All right, we're live. Hi, welcome to another Vervoe webinar. It's 10 a.m. here in Paradise. It's 8 p.m. in New York, 5 in California, and time for bed in Europe, which it usually seems to be. This is the third webinar so far in our series on the skills shortage. We started talking about, first one was candidate experience, second one was employer brand. Today, we're going to talk about screening people in, not out. And joining me today as our expert panelist is Richard Rushton from G4S, the biggest security company in the world, 750,000 employees globally. And G4S does everything in security from prisons to private security for celebrities and everything in between. And Richard leads the talent acquisition team in Australia and New Zealand. And just before I say welcome to Richard, Dom from our team at Vervoe is here with us because he's going to make a wonderful contribution, but also because my internet has died 3 times this morning already. And so if it happens again, you're going to get lucky and have Dom instead of me. He's much less annoying, but just I apologize in advance if that happens. Another gift from another working from home gift. So thanks, Dom, and Richard, welcome.
Hi, how are we doing today, Omar?
I'm good, subject to the internet, and thanks for joining. Let's get straight into it. We've got a lot of people attending and we've had a lot of questions in advance. Let's start from the beginning. Mm-hmm. What is screening and how did we get here? How did we get to a point where the goal of hiring is to exclude people?
Yeah, it's the age old, like you said, screening out. So people try and get to an end point of the process without investing enough. I feel investing enough time in it. So what the screening out comes from? You've got a lot. You start with having a job advert that excludes people. So you'll write a job advert. You'll have 10 points on it that you must have to be able to progress in the hiring funnel. Then the recruiter will look at those the people who've applied. A lot of people rule themselves out at that point because they don't have all 10 points to or 10 skills, should we say? They'll rule themselves out. So you'll narrow your funnel straight away. You then get to screening, which is you'll get potentially a recruiter speaking to people. They'll then screen people out against a job description, which is pretty generally a bit over the, I suppose, in the old scheme of things, a bit over the top in terms of the number of points that people are looking for. And then what will happen is you'll end up with 3 or 4 CVs that go to a hiring manager. The hiring manager will look at the 4 CVs, for example, and go, right, I like the look of these 2. I'll meet these 2. And there's not really a great reason why they pick those 2 a lot of the time. There's a lot of unconscious bias that comes behind that. That the hiring manager will a lot of the time will look at skills that they've had in the past or companies that they know, and they'll make a judgment on that, and they'll meet the people, the final 2 people face to face, and they're generally a lot of the time they'll pick the person they like in terms of a carbon copy of themselves a lot of the time. And that's the classic way of screening, I suppose.
So okay, so you sort of dropped some big words here. We talked about, you mentioned unconscious bias, you mentioned hiring managers, and you also said that we pick people we like. We're going to come back to those points. So let's just unpack that. This sounds like a mess and it sounds very inefficient. I mean, it seems to me that in addition to being inefficient, we're also potentially missing out on some people along the way that maybe should get to the final stage.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. So that begins right at the beginning of the funnel. So I always look at recruitment as a kind of funnel to finally get to the final group of people, should we say? And what happens is that because people narrow down, will start by narrowing down very early. They immediately exclude people from for example. Let's go back to looking at a process. So give an example that we kind of currently run. So we run a process for hiring prison guards. And with that process, what actually happens is that we have 600 or 700 people apply to a role. Now, previously, what we've done is we've literally gone through. We've looked at the CVs to begin with, and we've looked at the CVs, and we've gone, right, these 300 people we don't think are right. So we've taken 300 people straight away out of the funnel, and there's not really a great reason for doing that. That's a gut feel piece. We've then provided those CVs to the we then gone and we screened 300 people, which is a large. It takes a lot of time, for example, to do that.
Can I just jump in on that point? I just want to ask a question about the half that you're excluding.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like some sort of objective? If they don't have X number of years, like is there some sort of way to? And the second question I have is, in your opinion, I know we have no way of necessarily proving this, but in your opinion, the 300 that you sort of kick out at that point, what percentage of those do you think actually could do the job?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. Yeah, and I'll be pulling. Probably 50% of people have got the ability in there to potentially look at a role. And in terms of why you'd screen them out, people look at a CV. A recruiter will look at a CV. They'll use their unconscious bias to a degree. They'll look at it and they'll make a decision on how the CV is written. They'll look at how quickly people have moved between roles. They'll make a decision on the qualifications that people potentially have. But they've never spoken to the person at that point. They've just removed them from a process. And it's a dangerous thing to do because you don't really understand. You're not understanding the people at that point in time. You're just making a judgment on a very 2D kind of piece of paper.
Yeah. Okay, so I've never hired prison guards personally, but I can't imagine that there's a strong correlation between how well you write your CV and how good a prison guard you are. But that just seems to me. But okay, so let's say we've got rid of half the people gone.
Yeah.
What do we do with the next half?
So this is going back to a process we previously run. I'll bring us forward and shortly to what we currently kind of do. But what we then do is we would then screen the candidates through a phone screen or a video screening. But originally it was a phone screen, and it was a question. Then you go through and you see how people have reacted to certain questions and things. You then look at salaries, locations. You look at how they communicate. But it's again very subjective at that point in time in terms of who you're progressing to a next stage.
It's subjective. Okay, so the person doing the screening has a set. Presumably there are a few people because 300 phone calls, that's a lot for one person. So presumably there's more than one, and they may have a different opinion. So depending on who is doing the screening, you could also get lucky or unlucky as a candidate. Yeah,
very much so. So it depends. It's a funny situation in an interview as well. It's foreign to everybody. So some people perform well at that point themselves, and it brings the best out of them. A lot of people can be nervous when they get to that point. They can trip themselves up. And it also depends a lot on the skill of the interviewer as well, because what can happen is some people think that they have to scare people at an interview point, and they've got to and they're trying to trip them up. What you really want to be able to do is bring out what the person can bring to the role, and the skills, etc. And that's the trick of
how. Okay, so how do you do that? So you mentioned before that was the old process. So what have you learned, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, so that was an old process. So we've reviewed that over the last kind of 18 months or so, and we've introduced a new way of doing things, and that's starting at the very beginning. We write a very inclusive style of job advert. very few points in terms of what we actually need, because it's only a certain size of criteria you need to be a kind of prison guard. It's really then checking the skills that sit around that. So we encourage people to apply for the role. The other part of that is we're looking for return on investment on our advert. So the more people apply, the bigger the diversity and the spread of people that we can assess.
I just want to for the audience call that out, because we just said moments earlier that the sort of in the traditional hiring process the goal is exclusion, and what you said now is the opposite, which is we want as many people.
Yeah,
it's counterintuitive because I've got to end up with few people, but I want as many people as possible to apply, and I'm going to achieve that by encouraging, by having less kind of stringent criteria and opening things up. And hopefully you're going to tell us soon how that plays out, but I think that's an important point. So we're using the job description as a tool to sell the role better, make it less restrictive, and get more people, presumably from different backgrounds, coming in.
Yeah. And what does an inclusive job advert for a prison guard look like?
I think the difference between an inclusive an inclusive job advert is one that has it's written in a gender neutral way to start with. But then it explains about the role, explains about the people you'll be working with, explains about the site and the culture, explains about the benefits of doing the role, explains. So it tells you, it gives you a story about the position to give you the best information you possibly can to decide if you want to apply. And it doesn't have then a large criteria of reasons not to do the role and essential. So you only have 2 or 3 kind of what I would say essential points that are required versus a list of 10, which we previously may have had.
Okay, I like that. That's good. And so that's the first thing. So we've got a job description that's more kind of attractive, more inclusive, more open, encouraging more people to apply. What? So
once they apply to a role, we then put them through a Vervoe skills test. So and we put everybody who applies through to that. So they'll literally everyone who applies will get a return email from Vervoe encouraging them to basically take a skills assessment, and that skills assessment's based on the ability to do the role. So we'll look at the role, we'll identify 3 or 4 key things within a role that we need, and then we'll assess them against that through different kind of questions. It could be audio questions, it could be a video answer, it could be multiple choice, it could be a style of a written question. So various. We're looking at the skills of a person, and we can assess everyone who applies. So we don't have to assess a small group of people because we haven't got very much time to do it. We can assess literally everyone who applies, and people can do that in their own time. So they can, if they want to be filling it in at 10 o'clock at night, they can do that. It doesn't depend on when the interviewer, etc., is available. So the idea is then that everyone completes that, or many people who want to complete it do, and then we assess. Then we look at the criteria. So we'll have a percentage mark of people. So we have Vervoe has an AI that sits behind it, which I'm sure you can explain far better than I. But Vervoe has an AI that sits behind it, which can judge. So we train it with hiring managers and with recruiters to look at what a good and a bad answer is. It then learns and it assesses people. So we'll have over a 60%, for example, we'll have a criteria say of 60%, and everyone above 60%, we will then look at in detail. Below that number, they're probably not going to be right and they won't have the right skills, but it's giving us the time back to be able to assess the top 40% that do, kind of thing.
So I want to connect the dots for the audience. And while we're talking, there's been some discussion in the chat, and something that you touched on earlier, Georgia mentioned around, men and the difference between men and women. And I know you and I have discussed this offline that, there's 10 criteria for a role. Men will be like, yeah, I can do one of those, I'll apply. And women say, well, I can only do 8 or 9, so I'm not applying. Yeah. And I think Georgia just mentioned that, and a few people are asking about it. Yeah. And so you addressed that in the job description, where you said, like, we're only going to have 2 or 3 essential, must have criteria for the role. And presumably that leads to not more women and people from other underrepresented groups that would be less likely to apply otherwise. And the dots I wanted to connect is that presumably then in the skills assessment, we're really testing for those things and focusing on that as opposed to like a bunch of irrelevant things.
Yeah.
And so hopefully you're ending up at the end with people who can do the core 3 things and the rest kind of really it doesn't matter.
Yes, completely. That's exactly it. Very well summarized. It's definitely that we're assessing for what we're asking for it from fundamentally. We're also making it very clear to people the process that they're going to go through at the beginning as well, because
so can you think of? Sorry to put you. I'll put you on the spot here, but hopefully you've got an example of this. If you've got, think of an example of, someone who maybe on paper is less likely or underestimated or not sort of an obvious one of the people who would be in that 300 that was cast aside previously, is now getting through, and from an unexpected background and actually is great at the job. Have you got some examples of that?
We have lots of different kinds of people. It's really hard to pick what's going to be right and wrong in the role. So you have people from computer programmers to people who work with airlines to people
computer programmers, really.
Yeah, you get from prisons. You'll get all different groups of people. You'll get people who've worked in warehouses, people who've driven taxis. You'll get people who, like I said, who've worked in the holiday industry, in the hospitality industry. It's a real mix of people. And previously, you might, there's a good chance you'd be screening those people out just by looking at the CVs.
I mean, if I saw computer programmers applying for a prison guard role, that would not seem to me like an obvious fit on paper. But if you're telling me they're getting through and they're motivated and they're
no, you don't get hundreds of those kinds of people, but you get a real mix of diversity.
Yeah, so people that you would normally screen out, and I can understand in the old process a recruiter looking on paper going, well, this doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Out. But okay, so they're getting through. And so I want to come back to you talked earlier about the role of hiring managers and all the questions we've received prior to this webinar. The biggest recurring question, and by the way, this has been a recurring question in all 3 webinars we've done to date, is people are saying, well, I'm on board with this. I want to be more inclusive. I want to attract diverse candidates. I want to screen people in. I want to emphasize amplify my employer brand. I want to make a better candidate experience. But those pesky hiring managers, and I'm one of them. I'm a hiring manager, and so is Dom. They just want 2 people. Give me 2 people that have 5 years of experience in this exact thing or whatever, right? How do I get them on board with this kind of like new way of doing things, as opposed to just give me this exact thing? So let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so we bring them quite early into the piece now. So I have my recruiters work with we have lots of different contracts, as you can imagine, and we have my recruiters will work with the contract leads and people within and hiring managers within contracts, and they will bring them very early into the piece. So what they'll do is they'll bring, so instead of coming to them with 5 or 6 CVs, they'll come with the people who are over a certain percentage from our skills test. So and it'll give them the chance to review very early on in terms of the candidate, the types of candidates they want to progress with. So our hiring managers that buy into it, they will do things like they'll create the video up front. So when we're explaining about Vervoe to an applicant, a hiring manager will talk about their job, their contract, and they've got a vested interest in it because they want to find the right people for them. So they'll personalize it. They'll be right at the beginning of the funnel. So they'll be, like I said, talking about the job. They're making a video explaining the process. So they're brought in there, and then they're also brought in at the screening stage. So once we've put people through the skills assessment, they'll then look at the applicants, and it gives them it gives them a better feel for what's coming through as well. So
it sounds like you rather than sort of having this relationship of service provider to the hiring manager is your client. They're kind of a partner now. You're bringing
very much so.
They're coming in. They're sort of like riding shotgun throughout the process, rather than I'll do it and at the end I'll deliver you some candidates which you can say no to.
Yeah.
You know, to sort of be blunt about it.
Yeah, exactly that. We want them to be as involved as much as possible, because they're the ones who've got the greatest vested interest in finding the right people.
And what's the ROI, the speed difference in doing that? Like, in essentially some ways trying to consider more people at one part of the process where you would usually knock them out as quick as possible. Like, how do you incentivize that, and how do you how does that work in a candidate short market as well, where you need to make decisions quickly?
So in terms of return on investment, I mean, it's great for us because we can screen as many people as we want really now. We're not constrained by hours and things, so we're not constrained in terms of a recruiter has only got time fundamentally to screen 20 or 30 people. We can screen 600 people, kind of thing, and it's the return on that is huge for us. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's seeing a broad cross spectrum of the market. It's really important for us.
Coming back to the hiring managers, you mentioned sort of bringing them in, making them a partner, bringing them into the process, and I can totally see how that would empower someone. What about the next bit of, okay, I'm now going to give you this taxi driver candidate, or probably better examples, but that stuck in my head from earlier. Someone who maybe has a background that is not what you expected or are used to hiring. Can you talk about either an example of where you've seen someone's mindset shift, or what you're doing to try to shift the mindset of a hiring manager?
So that fundamentally, the hiring manager is not making a judgment on the CV anymore for us. So they're not seeing. So when they review the candidate base now, they're not seeing that person is a taxi driver or the background in terms of that. So they're reviewing in terms of how they come across in the skills test, how they're communicating, and can they do the role fundamentally. They're not making a judgment saying, well, because that person at some point in their life was a taxi driver, they can't do my role now. It's definitely about being able to judge on the skills. So we're removing that CV from the process until very near the end.
And what's the level of sort of anxiety or resistance you've encountered around removing the CV? Because I know some people have it's a hard thing to let go of. We've been using the CV since Leonardo da Vinci. It's not something that in 5 minutes we're just going to discard.
The hiring managers really enjoy being involved. So they enjoy reviewing the Vervoes. They enjoy looking at the candidates. They enjoy making the decision. I think that they previously only had the choice of looking at the CV. Now they've got something different to look at. We're not really picking up a lot of resistance against that.
That's great. I've got one more, and then Dom, you can feel free to just jump in with sort of other questions from the audience. I just wanted to ask the market at the moment, and I don't know specifically around insecurity, but just generally, and I assume it's impacted you as well. Is considered candidate short. That's not to say there are no candidates, but certainly there's record job vacancies. People are moving. People are now working from home. Some people are not choosing not to go back into the workforce. There's government stimulus. That there are a whole bunch of things influencing the current market, such that on average there are less applicants. Can you talk a bit about A, has that impacted you, and B, have you responded? Has there been are you doing anything differently in relation to that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's in our industry, it's not affected it too much. To be very honest about it, we're still getting good numbers in terms of the style of adverts and things that we're putting up. I mean, that in terms of saying that though, I mean, if we look at, for example, our security, our prison officers, even on mobile speed camera roles, we get lots of applicants. But it's when you get to your very niche, more niche head office roles, that's where the impact's being seen more. We're definitely finding that that's slowing down. For example, if we're looking for a particular computer kind of analyst or something like that, we're definitely seeing a shortfall in terms of that, and that's a slightly different area in terms of screening in and out, because people need very definitive skills around it. But that's where we're seeing the biggest change.
And what are some of the things that you can offer advice on with respect to those roles? Is it moving quicker? Is it opening up the requirements? Is it training people? Is it internal?
So it's moving quickly. So fundamentally, it's keeping an eye on the market, moving very quickly. When people do apply to you, you have to move on them straight away. You can't be waiting. Hiring managers a lot of the time could be looking at, I want 3 or 4 good candidates and then I'll decide. You have to make a decision on one candidate at a time and decide if they're going to be right or wrong.
So the old sort of, I've got someone good, but I want to sort of do some comparison shopping and see if I can,
You'll lose that candidate. You'll lose the other candidate during that period, during your shopping period. And the other piece is to be very proactive. So don't rely on your adverts. They're only ever going to give you so many candidates. Be proactive. Go out there, headhunt, mine your Seeks, mine your LinkedIn's, etc. of the world.
Gotcha. Dom, was there anything else we wanted from the audience that we wanted to jump in with?
Yeah, we kind of have covered a lot of the hiring manager stuff. I guess one that I like riffing off of some of what we've got here. And if anyone's got questions, please feel free to pop them in the box. See the chat lighting up. But how long did it take? Like, what was the process of changing the flow of like how hiring managers are brought into the process and how to incentivize them, considering people that maybe are 70% of the way there and just need a bit of extra development for the role? Like, how long?
It takes a bit of educating with people. There are people who just want to jump straight in and kind of give it a go, and start reviewing candidates. But what's really important is that we teach them about the tool. We teach them the benefits of the tool. We then spend a period of time with the hiring manager, reviewing people with them as well, to give an idea of what we're looking for in an answer, what's a good and a bad answer. And it can take some people a little bit longer to learn, but it's patience. And we haven't had resistance yet of any real degree within our business. People are seeing it as a real plus point. Yeah,
and I guess like one of the big like pickups here. Sorry, Amir, did you?
No, go.
Is people the first layer of screening seems to be people themselves reading the job advert and counting themselves out and rethinking that very first touch point.
I think what's really important, I think is, and we're doing it a lot more now, is that it's bringing to life to people what the job's actually going to look like, and showing them and demonstrating that the best as you can, and letting people self-select in and out, or giving them the best criteria. So what I haven't got to is that once we've gone through screening processes, etc., we'll show people around our prison, around prison sites, and then we'll talk to them about what the role looks like, and then we'll walk away. We won't assess them then. They then decide if it's the right or wrong thing for them. And you want to tell people as much about a role and let them select if it's going to be the right or wrong thing for them. And then you can look at your criteria against that.
So we're coming up on time. Let's wrap and do a quick summary, because I think there's been a lot here, and I want to sort of close the loop for people. So it's kind of 3 major points, and jump in if I've missed anything major. So the first thing is, let's use the job ad as an invitation, not a gatekeeping exercise, right? Open it up, invite people, sell the job, show them why it's for them. Keep it pretty tight on the really sort of the hard requirements. So that's the first thing. Second thing is focus on who can do the work, who has the skills. Do that in parallel, not sort of who worked as a taxi driver, because we know that's totally relevant. And we know that the mind will play tricks on us because we're going to gravitate towards people that we feel comfortable with. And the third thing is bring the hiring managers along for the journey right from the start, make them a partner. Don't deliver them a pile of CVs at the end. They're just going to resent it. They're going to be suspicious. And then they're going to come back to the old sort of, give me this person or that person. I want to see more. Bring them along. They'll see, they'll get comfortable, and they'll focus on the work. Have I missed anything, guys?
That's a good synopsis. Far more succinct than I am.
Well, guys, thanks a lot. Richard, in particular, it's been really insightful to hear not just your opinions on this, but also the stories, the examples from your own work. I think we never get to everything, but I think we touched on some of the key sort of things that the audience that wanted us to address. We've got another webinar lined up, so it's sort of we're going to continue to address this issue of the skills shortage, and each time tweak the focus. Today was on screening people in, not out. Thank you so much, Richard, from G4S, and thanks for helping Dom, and thank you so much to everyone from the audience who dialed in, and we'll be sharing the recording with everyone who couldn't make it. Thanks very much. It's a wrap.